The last time anyone in Maple Creek saw Sarah Jenkins alive was on a Tuesday afternoon in early October. She was helping a student, little Leo Vance, find his lost mitten in the cloakroom of Maple Creek Elementary. She had that easy, incandescent smile on her face, the one that made parents feel their children were not just taught, but cherished. At 36, Sarah was more than a fifth-grade teacher. She was a town institution, the kind of person who seemed woven into the very fabric of the close-knit community. So, when she didn't show up for school on Wednesday, the concern was immediate and palpable. Principal Henderson, a man who ran his school with the precision of a Swiss watch, called her cell. It went straight to voicemail. He called her home landline. No answer. By 10 a.m., he'd driven to her small, tidy bungalow on Elm Street himself. The morning paper was still on the porch, dewy and unread. A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He called the police. Detective Frank Miller, a 25-year veteran of the county sheriff's department, got the call. In a town like Maple Creek, major crime usually meant a DUI or a dispute over a property line. A missing person, especially one as beloved as Sarah Jenkins, felt like a tear in the universe. Her house was eerily pristine. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. Her purse was on the kitchen counter, but her car keys and cell phone were gone. Her car, a sensible blue sedan, was also missing. The initial theory formed quickly and grimly, a random act of violence. She probably stopped for gas, or maybe pulled over to help someone. Miller's younger, more eager partner, Detective Evans, suggested. Wrong place, wrong time. A transient, a carjacker. It was a plausible, terrifying narrative. The town clung to it with a kind of morbid comfort. A faceless monster from outside was easier to comprehend than a threat from within. Search parties were organized. Yellow ribbons, the color of hope, were tied around the ancient maples lining the streets. At a town vigil, Leo Vance's mother, Eleanor, the impeccably dressed and formidable PTA president, gave a tearful speech about how Sarah had been a guiding light for her son. The whole town mourned the loss of its innocence. 2 days later, Sarah's car was found abandoned on the shoulder of an interstate 40 miles away. The interior was clean, wiped down. No prints, no blood, no Sarah. The random abduction theory solidified. The FBI was consulted. The case felt vast, cold, and impersonal. But Frank Miller was a small-town cop to his core. He believed that answers were rarely found on the interstate. They were found in the quiet, overlooked details of a person's life. While the FBI profiled transient criminals, Miller sat in his office, poring over Sarah Jenkins' life. He started with her finances. Everyone said she was simple, frugal. Her ex-husband, a quiet contractor who'd moved to the next town over, confirmed it. Their divorce had been amicable, a simple drifting apart. Sarah didn't have an expensive bone in her body, he'd said, his eyes filled with a genuine, baffled sadness. But the bank statements told a different story. For the past 6 months, there were regular, large cash withdrawals. $500 here, $1,000 there. Always from an ATM in a town 30 miles away, near a gritty industrial park. Then Miller found it. A recurring charge on her secret credit card. One she'd opened 6 months ago, to a place called the Fox's Den, a dingy roadside tavern not far from that same ATM. Sarah Jenkins, the cookie-baking, mitten-finding schoolteacher, had a secret life. Miller and Evans drove to the Fox's Denver. The place smelled of stale beer and regret. The bartender, a man with a roadmap of veins on his nose, didn't recognize Sarah's photo at first. But when Miller mentioned she might have been there on a Monday night, the bartender's eyes flickered. Mondays is poker night. In the back, he grunted. High stakes. Private game. The foundation of the case cracked wide open. The image of Sarah Jenkins, pillar of the community, shattered. She wasn't just a teacher. She was a gambler. A deep-diving gambler. The detectives tracked down the other players. They were a motley crew of local businessmen, a disgraced dentist, and a few characters with hazy professions. They described Sarah as a surprisingly shrewd player, but one who was on a desperate losing streak. She was in deep. The name they all mentioned, the person she owed the most, was the game's quiet, unassuming banker, Eleanor Vance. Miller felt a jolt, as if he'd touched a live wire. Eleanor Vance, the PTA president. the mother of the last child to see Sarah alive, the woman who had wept so convincingly at the vigil. "No way," Evans said, shaking his head. "She's a soccer mom. Her husband's a wealth manager. They don't need the money." "It's not always about the money," Miller said, his voice low. They brought Eleanor in for a routine follow-up. She sat across from them in the sterile interview room, her posture perfect, her expression one of polite concern. She answered questions about the PTA and her son's grief with practiced ease. Then Miller changed tack. "Tell us about Monday nights, Eleanor." A flicker, so slight, most would miss it. A tightening around her eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean." "The Fox's Denver. The poker game," Miller said, laying a photo of the tavern on the table. "Sarah owed you a lot of money, didn't she?" The mask of the perfect suburban mother didn't just crack, it disintegrated. Her face hardened, the soft lines turning to granite. "She was irresponsible. I was trying to help her. I introduced her to the game, thinking she could make some quick money to solve her problems. She had debts I knew about. A sick parent, medical bills. I was trying to be a friend." The lie was smooth, but the story was crumbling. They dug into Eleanor's life. The Vances weren't just wealthy. They were drowning in debt, their lavish lifestyle a house of cards funded by bad investments. Eleanor wasn't the banker of the poker game. She was its shark, preying on the desperate, and Sarah had been her biggest fish. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most mundane of sources: the town's automated license plate reader, positioned on the main road out of Maple Creek. Evans, a digital native, thought to cross-reference its logs. On the night Sarah disappeared, her blue sedan was recorded leaving town at 9:17 p.m. Following just 10 seconds behind was a black luxury SUV, registered to Eleanor Vance. They confronted her with the new evidence. This time, there was no composure. There was only a cold, terrifying fury. "She was going to ruin me," Eleanor hissed, the words venomous. "She lost everything. Over $30,000. On that Tuesday, she came to my house. She said she was going to the police, that she'd expose the whole thing. The game, my debt's everything." The scene played out in Miller's mind, a darkened version of their public personas. The confrontation wasn't in a classroom or at a PTA meeting, but in Eleanor's pristine, designer kitchen. "She said my son would know what a fraud I was," Eleanor continued, her voice breaking with a chilling self-pity. "She was destroying my family. I have to protect my family." There was an argument. It escalated. Sarah turned to leave, to make the call that would implode Eleanor's world. Eleanor grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a decorative marble rolling pin from her countertop. She hit Sarah from behind. Once. It wasn't a planned murder. It was a panicked, selfish act of preservation. Eleanor, the master of appearances, then staged the perfect cover-up. She drove Sarah's car to the interstate, wiped it clean, and walked to a prearranged spot where her husband, a terrified accomplice, was waiting. She buried Sarah's body in the woods behind their sprawling, heavily mortgaged home. The day they found Sarah Jenkins, the yellow ribbons were still tied to the trees in Maple Creek. They no longer looked like symbols of hope, but like cheap, flimsy tokens of a town's naivete. The real monster wasn't a faceless stranger on the highway. It was the woman who organized the bake sale, the one who smiled from the front row of school assemblies. It was a reminder that the most devastating secrets are often hidden in plain sight, behind the most perfect, smiling facades. Frank Miller looked out at the town he had sworn to protect, a community now grappling with a betrayal so deep it might never fully heal, and knew that Maple Creek would never be the same.